Cheong-san had been surveying the building for a while. He had searched up and down the halls, always making sure to keep out of sight when he heard a lot of the zombies. But something that started to become evident to him was how the building seemed more scarce than it should have been. He could guess that some had gone outside or were in other parts of the building, but there should have been more. He stepped into a hall descending from the steps and was met with the sight of what almost looked like the back of Mrs. Park. She wasn't moving and was just standing in the hallway with some others in the distance. He could see a large group behind her, and she was just looking that way. There must be someone in there, he thought as he looked at the group gathered outside a classroom. He knew he had to find a way to get in there. He knew that it was probably too late, but he wanted to check anyway. He choked out a mutter. "Mrs. Park?" he asked. Her body shivered visibly as her neck twisted at an ungodly angle. His blood froze as she let out a snarl, then a roar that seemed to freeze him to his core. Seeing her like this for him was just painful. Out of all of them, she had been the one that wanted to get all of them out of there alive. Even Na-Yeon, who he thought didn't deserve that mercy. Again, he shook that thought he didn't want to think like that. He knew he had to push past this to save as many as he could. Within moments, he was already turned around, running full speed up the stairs again as the zombies behind him gave chase. Mrs. Park was leading the pack as he ran up the stairs to the upper floor hallway, and the monsters continued to give chase. He hoped he had attracted more of them as he bolted straight past the floor his friends were hiding. He saw the opposite stairway coming into view as he shouldered past a monster that tried to get the drop on him in the staircase. He thought his plan was working well as he returned to the floor he had led them from, but could hear them on his tail. He knew he needed one more runaround. He ran towards the classroom where the monsters had been gathered, before then ducked and dived past the stragglers that had stayed behind. He banged on the windows of the classroom as he ran past. "Na-Yeon! Are you here? Na-Yeon! Na-Yeon!" he shouted in measured breaths as he ran past the classroom. Na-Yeon had been trying to fall into a restless slumber when she heard her name being called out. She perked up as she thought someone had finally come to save her from this nightmare, but that thought stopped as she remembered who this voice belonged to. No please anyone but him. She could hear the voice fade into the distance as it went past, ran past, she could assume, and that was confirmed when she heard those monsters running past, snarling and screaming in tow. She slowly got up and walked to the door as she opened it slowly. It was quiet once again, but she knew peace like that didn't last as she got low and headed towards the door. She heard the footsteps before any noise and peeked through the window. Then she heard her name being called again. "Na-Yeon! Are you here? Na-Yeon! Na-Yeon!" Before she could think of what to do or even respond, they made eye contact as he slowed momentarily. He seemed just as shocked to see her, but something behind him made him look back and then motion to open the door. He nodded, then signaled that he would be running back around, and he left. The approaching snarls and screams made her duck down. At that moment, she ran through all the thoughts that were on her mind. "He's come to kill me. He's not wrong for that. I deserve to die. I killed someone because he made fun of me. They always made fun of me." Thinking I couldn't hear them. But I became the monster they spoke about. With that last thought, she slowly stood up and reached for the door and waited to open it. She heard him approaching again and peered out the window to confirm it was him. They made eye contact again. She couldn't tell what he was thinking since his face didn't show any anger or anything, probably because he was running for his life. Once she opened the door to let him in, she heard the growl before she saw anything. One of those monsters was standing there behind her to the side. How had she missed it? She could hear it, but she froze. Maybe this is what I deserve. A monster taken out by another monster. Cheong-san saw the sight before him. One of those monsters had stayed behind while he lured them around. He expected strays, but not at this very moment, and worse was the resigned look on Na-Yeon's face, but he wasn't going to let that happen. He charged and jumped, drop-kicking the monster, before scrambling to his feet and pushing her back into the classroom, locking the door. He unconsciously put Na-Yeon behind him as the rest of the horde that had been chasing him arrived in quick succession, banging on the door and windows. She did notice him doing this, and it just felt like a stab in the heart, even more, knowing that he came out here to look for her and was protecting her right now. If he was being honest with himself, he hadn't thought of what to do if he actually found her and Mrs. Park. That thought hurt because he hadn't made it in time to save her. Na-Yeon was a victory he repeated to himself as if a mantra, but now he didn't know what to do or how he was going to get her out of here. "In here," he heard from behind him as he turned to look at Na-Yeon opening a door to a storage room. The horde banged louder, no doubt probably attracting more. She quickly pushed him in and closed the door behind them, making sure to lock it. Once they were out of sight, they stood for a while hearing the monsters outside as they seemed to calm down slightly. They waited a while and the noise died down even more. Cheong-san turned around and was met with the sight of Na-Yeon's tear-streaked face standing in the moonlight of the window. His grip on his weapon tightened, and he could see her eyes seem to be looking at it. Then she looked at his. She let out a shaky breath as if steadying herself before choking on unspoken words and then shaking her head. "So I'm guessing you came to do it yourself?" she said with a pained smile that broke him to his core, loosening the grip on his weapon slightly. "I don't mind," she said, wrapping her arms around herself, trying her best to look at him in the eyes to make sure he could tell she wasn't lying. "I deserve it." He didn't know what to say. So he didn't. He looked around the room that was filled with supplies that the group could use, but he knew they probably couldn't get these to them. That was a problem for tomorrow, but he could still feel her eyes on him as if waiting on an answer, an action. "Get some sleep. I'll keep the first watch," he said as he sat down opposite her in the room.